former National Security Advisor for the Carter administration, and advisor to this day to all of us in the Congress of the United States and two administrations. Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you very much. Majority Leader Hoyer, Ambassador Kubecki, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and also those of you who come from Russia, to whom I want to express special feeling of gratitude and appreciation, because I know that throughout these many years, there were brave, courageous Russians who stood for truth, who thereby stood for reconciliation, who thereby took personal risks of the kind that most of us did not have to face. So I'm delighted that they're with us, because they represent the best of Russia, and I truly believe they represent the future of Russia. Katyn occurred in the midst of the worst war that humanity ever experienced. It was a war pregnant with crimes, not only a bloody war among fighters, but a bloodthirsty war that consumed millions and millions of innocents. Katyn occurred in that midst. On the total scale of things, it wasn't that large, actually. Think of the Holocaust. Think of the hundreds of thousands who perished in the burning cities, whether in Germany or in Japan. And of course, earlier still, in Poland, in Holland, in Britain. Think of the thousands of hostages executed, of the thousands who perished in death camps. So why has Katyn stood so specially in the memory of Poles and has lingered so heavily over the Polish-Russian relationship? It is, of course, and first of all, the crime itself, the killing of helpless prisoners of war, the killing of the elite of a country, military but intellectual also, because so many of those killed were actually distinguished individuals in their society who were mobilized to serve in uniform, and who therefore died both as military and as civilians, victims of a crime. But more than that, and I sensed this myself as a child, the reason that Katyn was so indelible and so morally intolerable was that it was a murder shrouded by a lie, institutionalized globally, and the lie was globally accepted on the whole. That's what really hurt. That's what really hurt. Think of a Jewish community ruled by some rulers who, for political reasons, would insist that the Holocaust never occurred. That would make the Holocaust even more intolerable. And that is what hurt. For 50 years, that lie endured. And in Poland, if you were an ambitious young person applying for a senior position or for a military commission, if you indicated on your vitae that your father died in April of 1940, the official lie was that it occurred in 1941, that your father died in April of 1940, you were automatically suspected of being anti-Soviet, anti-communist. So you had to lie about something that was to you a personal tragedy. Yes, as the years went on and as the communist regime became weaker, there was more sense within the country that we know it is a lie. But it was still a lie. And that's what really hurt. Let me tell you a little personal story about myself. I was not in Poland during the war. I was lucky to be in America. But I sensed some of that. And in 1989, I was on a trip to the Soviet Union. Not the first trip, but perhaps in some respects the most interesting trip. I was invited by the Gorbachev regime to visit Russia. I spoke at the Diplomatic Academy, the first time a foreigner from the West was ever permitted to speak at the Diplomatic Academy. It was filled with people. There was a sense of excitement. I stood under a statue of Lenin, that famous statue in which he holds his hand up. And I talked about the possibilities of change. And I got the idea, because of the atmosphere being so charged and so receptive, that I should visit Katyn. And I asked the Gorbachev regime, through Yakovlev, whom I knew well, and who was an extremely decent man who was struggling for change, for support from the Soviet government, for approval, of course, and for hospitality. And it was readily granted. And I told the American ambassador that I want him to come with me, because I didn't want to make it a Polish-American pilgrimage. I wanted it to be my pilgrimage, but also an American pilgrimage. And the American ambassador immediately said yes. And several other people became part of our entourage. We went by train to Smolensk. We were greeted at the station by the party secretary for the region, the Oblast secretary, and who invited us to a lovely breakfast. And of course, limousines were ready to drive us to the Katyn woods. We were all somewhat emotionally charged. I certainly was. And as I was getting into the first limousine with the American ambassador, the party secretary came up to me and handed me a wreath, a beautiful wreath, to deploy on a monument that already was placed there, because Poles from communist Poland were being allowed to come occasionally. But the monument had a false date on it, 1941. And I took the wreath and I sat down in the car, and then I noticed there was a ribbon around it. And the ribbon had an inscription on it. And it said, "To the Polish officers, victims of Hitlerite fascists, 1941. And I remember to this day my sense of rage. I ripped off that ribbon. I told the American ambassador to give me a big sheet of paper, which he produced, and I wrote in big letters on it, "For Polish officers, victims of Stalin and the NKVD, 1940, and I attached it to the wreath.